Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Wilkie with the Shine Advocacy Group, and I am beyond excited today to talk with my favorite parenting book author and really world-famous child psychologist, Dr. Ross Greene. Hi, Dr. Greene.
How you doing?
Very well, thank you. I know you're the author of The Explosive Child. I own 3 copies personally, and Lost at School, Lost and Found, and then Raising Human Beings. Dr. Greene, I work as an education advocate, so I help students with learning differences, get the help that they need at school, and talk to parents daily of kiddos with ADHD, autism, and behaviorally challenging children. And they ask me often what to do with these behaviors, and that's a common topic in IEP meetings, and your work is always the first thing that comes to mind for me. So I'm so grateful that you're talking to us today. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to create the collaborative and proactive solutions model, which I personally and professionally find life-changing?
Sure thing. I'm a child psychologist. And, I was trained the way a lot of mental health professionals are trained. I was trained to focus primarily on behavior, and I was trained on strategies for modifying that behavior. But that is not what collaborative and proactive solutions has people doing. Collaborative and proactive solutions has people focused instead on the problems that are causing those challenging behaviors and solving them. So behavior is something like hitting or screaming or swearing or crying or withdrawing. The problems that are causing those behaviors are completely different. Those are things like difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math, difficulty sharing the remote control with your brother when you're watching TV together, difficulty getting off the Xbox when it's time to come in for dinner, difficulty brushing teeth before going to bed at night. Those are problems. Those are expectations. And if a kid is having difficulty meeting those expectations, we call them unsolved problems. And in collaborative and proactive solutions, what we have caregivers doing, instead of focusing on the behaviors with rewarding and punishing, and by the way, rewarding and punishing solves none of those problems. Those are behavior modification strategies, not problem-solving strategies. And the truth is, I've seen rewarding and punishing, both rewarding and punishing, cause kids' behavior to become even more escalated. But the bottom line is rewarding and punishing doesn't solve any problems. And so what we have people doing in this model is solving those problems, and we have them doing it with 2 criteria. The problem solving needs to be collaborative, meaning something you're doing with the kid, not to the kid. And it needs to be proactive, preferably, meaning not in the heat of the moment. Now, when I say that, many people think, how can I not do this in the heat of the moment? The kids' difficulties are so unpredictable. They're so out of the blue. I never know when it's going to happen, except that they're not unpredictable. The expectations that kids are having difficulty meeting don't vary that much from day to day. They've been the same in the case of most kids, those expectations they've been having difficulty meeting have been the same for the last 3 years. That means they're very predictable. That means that if we identify them proactively, they can be solved proactively. One of my favorite mantras with the parents and educators that I work with is, I'm going to get you out of the heat of the moment. Nothing good happens in the heat of the moment. And by the time you're in the heat of the moment, you are in crisis management mode. We want people to be in crisis prevention mode. We don't want people focusing on the behavior. That's late.
Right.
We want people focused on the problems that are causing those behavior. That's early. That's crisis prevention.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I see it professionally now. And then from a 360 degree, if I could go back, my husband actually found your book. We had one of those weekends where we were both doing a lot of internet searching. Our child was very behaviorally challenged at about 5. In true disclosure, I felt a bit like a failure. I had worked with kids my whole life, kids with autism. I worked in disability services, and my son was very challenging. My husband brought your book home from a business trip. We both read it. Our inventory was so long, we had to print out two, and we started working through it, and it works. It truly works. A little funny story that goes with that. My son was young and he was trying to hurt us and trying to express himself with his behaviors. And he's like, well, Mom, I'm going to go to your nightstand and I'm going to rip up your most favorite book. So whenever I speak to your book, I don't know if you can see it, but the cover's ripped and taped back on, because ironically, my son went and ripped up The Explosive Child in an explosive rage. And since then, he's grew with leaps and bounds. And whenever I work with the school team, they might not be calling it CPS, but if they go out of the safety hold model and out of the, just reactive versus proactive model, in 2 weeks time, I've seen such huge changes. I just wish that your book would fall from the sky, especially right now during COVID when everyone's behaviors are upticked even more. Yep. So what tools, if someone could pick your brain in an elevator, what tools would you share for parents who are completely overwhelmed? Even the thought of reading a book is overwhelming to them. What are some kind of at your fingertip tools that you like to share?
Well, in terms of concrete tools, one of the most important ones is the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, which is the instrument I created to help people, number one, get the right lenses on. This kid is lacking skills, not motivation. And number two, know what problems they need to be busy solving. And that instrument is available on the Lives in the Balance website, which hopefully you'll give the URL of that to your viewers and listeners. But also on the Lives in the Balance website, for people who are too exhausted to read a book, is the walking tour for parents and the walking tour for educators. All of this is free. And it walks people through the model through streaming video and audio programming much faster than they would be able to make their way through the book. So if book reading isn't their gig, and even if book reading is their gig, get on the website, livesinthebalance.org. The assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems is there, and the walking tours are there, and it's all free.
Yeah, it's great. It's such an awesome resource. And the book, I really encourage any parent. I made the time. It took me longer than it should have, but if you can get this book and read it, even if it's slowly, there's so many good tidbits. And I had to read it. I think I'm going on like 3 times because it is, it's a process, but the steps are so worth your time because the outcome is it's literally been life-changing for so many of my clients and for my son as well. So we appreciate you beyond measure. I also am a huge fan of your documentary, The Kids We Lose. I will say that it was life-changing for my parents who are, grandparent age, and it's hard when ADHD is so prevalent in a family to understand it if it's different than your lens that you grew up with. And it really helped explain some of the behaviors to my family personally and then to the community I work in. How can people view your documentary, The Kids We Lose?
Well, at this point, they would probably need to buy it, but it's cheap.
Yeah.
It's available. First of all, I don't remember where it's available, but if they go to thekidswelose.com, okay, it will link them to the places where they can purchase views of the film. It was out there not for purchase for a long time, but now it's really long. Right. But now it's about the same price as any other film that they would rent. Mm-hmm. So people can view it fairly easily.
Yeah, the one story that really stood out to me is how behaviorally challenged a child with, like, let's say a reading disability like dyslexia, that case in the film, and I see that, and I'm seeing it more and more now where schools are very overwhelmed, so maybe reading disabilities are being detected too many years too late, and the students starting to get extreme anxiety, and their behavior is telling us something's wrong and we're looking at the wrong thing. So that really stood out to me. And now in my work, I've seen that.
That's what concerning behaviors tell us.
Right.
Nothing more, nothing less. There's an expectation I'm having difficulty meeting. And the longer I'm having difficulty meeting that expectation, sometimes the more concerning the behavior is, because, and this is a cliche at this point, but it's a really important cliche, behavior simply communicates that there's an expectation that a kid is having difficulty meeting. Period. End of story. So if all we're focused on is the behavior, we're missing the forest for the trees because we're not focused on the expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. Even if you improve the kid's behavior, which I call the signal, the fever, you're not fixing the problem that caused the behavior in the first place. But if you're busy solving the problem that's causing the behavior in the first place, not only does the behavior improve, the problem gets solved.
Everything becomes more peaceful. Everyone's needs are met. I agree. And I really have seen a lot of parents that I work with and myself. Now, our students are going through something, you know, we're asking them to stop their lives for a while to protect us as adults. And I think that the youth have handled it remarkably well, just phenomenally well, better than many adults I know. But I also have seen a lot of upticks in behavior, understandably, which, you know, I'm sure you're seeing and hearing too. What are some tips that you would give parents who are now at home trying to work full time, also have students, many of them with special, unique, high needs? What are some tips that you would give them to kind of pandemic parent with behaviorally challenging kiddos?
Well, the first thing I should say is that Lives in the Balance just released its findings from our rather large survey of parents on parenting during the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
And if people just log on to livesinthebalance.org, they can find those findings quickly. It's pretty striking just how much many parents or kids are struggling. Yeah. The parents and kids who are struggling the most are the parents who have a child with behavioral challenges, which is not surprising, but there's a lot of people who are really struggling out there. But at least those data for parents who are struggling will help them realize that they are not alone. Many people are going through the same thing. That doesn't make it any better, but at least it helps people feel like they're not in this all by themselves.
Right.
Yes, the other big things that I would say would be this. I think parenting during a pandemic is the same as parenting not in the pandemic, but even more so. Before there was a pandemic, we wanted caregivers to be as collaborative as possible in helping their kids meet expectations that their kids were having difficulty meeting. Okay. But we also, even before the pandemic, but even more important now, wanted caregivers to focus on what their expectations were, whether they were reasonable, whether they were realistic for a particular child. I don't believe in out of the blue expectations, willy-nilly expectations just because somebody else's kid is able to meet that expectation. Expectations have to be well matched to your kid. And in a lot of cases in my work in schools and families and therapeutic facilities, one of the biggest reasons kids are getting set off is because they are having expectations placed on them that they are unable to meet at this point. Sometimes when we have caregivers make a list of all of those expectations, caregivers say, wow, look at all of the expectations this kid is having difficulty meeting. He wakes up in the morning and is greeted with these 40 or 50 things that we want him to do that he can't do. What are we doing?
Right.
And so taking a really hard look at our expectations and taking a really hard look at which ones we actually want desperately to have met now, which ones are not in range right now, which ones are really important and which ones really aren't. I would say that that is particularly important during the pandemic when everybody is more stressed, more frustrated, together more. Yeah. I would say that collaborating and keeping a close eye on whether your expectations are well matched to who your kid is and what your kid can do, those were important before the pandemic. They are even more important now.
Agreed. Yeah, and I've had to do it for myself. I started in the beginning, so whatever I start to stress, I think we picked our son up from school for spring break of 2019, and he's not gone back yet. He has not seen a friend from his school. His whole world has changed. And so we had made a lot of growth and strides, and he was doing quite well, and he still is, but we've really had to pare our list down, and I've had to pare my list down. And personally, what I've done, if I'm having kind of a crummy day, is I try to think like Mr. Rogers style, like be a helper. And I always tell my son, like, you cannot feel too terrible if you're helping other people. So we just try to do one little thing. So you talking to us after you've talked to Oprah and Shine Advocacy Group is very small in comparison, is such a huge kind act. And I couldn't thank you enough. You've really made my 2021 wonderful so far, Dr. Greene, and all of the people who listen. So thank you, thank you.
You've got a long way to go as it relates to 2021, but I'm happy
Yeah.
to do it. And the fact that you are doing these podcasts for people is you being a helpful helper. So you know what? We're all in it together.
We are. And what, one last resource, I'll post all of these and share, but I've been delving into that truecrisisprevention.org, which has a lot of videos that you've taken your time to do. So I'll post that as well. It is a lot of real life examples of how to do the CPS model.
Outstanding.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Stay well, Dr. Greene.
My pleasure. You too.
All right. Take care.
Take care.